when it comes down to asking them for the money, we use key phrases, not how much money do you have saved or how much money do you have or how much, do you have invested? And we use this one key phrase that worked on every single phone call, and it's
welcome into Impactful Conversations, stories and lessons for financial advisors. I'm your host, Dave Edgecombe. Joining me, we got Beth Page in the hot seat, as we like to call it, although this is a little bit of a cold room. I apologize for that. But for those of you that don't know Beth is Impact's conversion coach, and her wheelhouse is, I hesitate to call it a simple one, but it's turning prospects into clients. I mean, that's what you do. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I know that this is one that we've been really looking forward to, and we've kind of dubbed it the "How do you work less and produce more" series, because that's sort of your bread and butter.
Yep.
And you've got a really unique path to how you ended up at Impact, but overall at an advisor's office that started out doing. I mean, what was Daryl doing when you first got there?
Gosh, I think, he had been in the business quite some time already, but I think he was right around like the 50 million threshold.
Yeah.
In his career, 20 years in, doing about 50 million a year.
And you will find out shortly what Beth's role in really helping to grow Daryl's practice to Impact's number one before he ultimately sold his practice. So, I mean, he was the real deal, and Beth had played an integral part in that. We're going to talk about pre-qualifying. We're going to talk about what I've dubbed the objection equation, because in our pre-call, you made a good point about questions need prefaces. So I want to get into that. Phrases that work, asking easy questions first, and the value of the wait list. So you've got a lot of tools and tricks to get into. But before we do that part, I think we want to kind of know how you ended up here and sort of your road to the conversion coach that you are now for a lot of our advisors.
Sure. So I started working for Daryl. I had no financial background when I came on board at his practice. I have a sales background. I'd worked in sales my entire life, and he just really mentored me, gave me all the verbiage that I needed, taught me a lot of things. I ended up getting my life and annuities license to really understand the business. But he told me what to say. We had a lot of radio callers calling in at the time, told me, how to talk to them, taught me how to talk to them, and basically how to convert the people calling in to coming into the office for an appointment. And then as the evolution progressed, it wasn't just showing up to your appointment with a pile of paperwork saying, here, look at all my stuff. It was a well-oiled machine on, let's schedule the meeting. Let's get all their statements in advance. Let's run some analysis for them before they even step foot in the office, so that we really could pump through so much business quickly and just have that.
A process.
Yeah.
That's in our pre-call. That's what I picked up on, was this was a well-oiled machine because the left hand knew what the right hand was doing.
Exactly.
Like you guys were all on the same page. I think one of the things that jumps out to me when I talk to other advisors about how you've helped them is the notion of pre-qualifying.
Yeah.
And I know that you're a big believer in this, and I think that was something that probably really helped Daryl at the time, was being firm on those pre-qualifications. So tell me a little bit, give me your pitch of what you tell an advisor about why pre-qualifying is such a game changer when it comes to closing leads.
Sure. Well, so we didn't pre-qualify once upon a time. Back in the day, it was just like, let's get everybody in here. Anybody that's calling in, let's get them in. Let's hope they have some stuff and that we can do business with them. But that's not a great business model, because you're spending a lot of time and a lot of energy having meetings with somebody that doesn't have the assets as you would with somebody that has, a couple $1 million. So we started having conversations with people on the front end to determine, is this somebody we want to invite into the office? Instead of, are we the advisor you want to work with? It was like, are you the clients that we want to keep? And so pre-qualifying then became a process, and it's so simple to do it. You're really just getting to know the person, getting to know their life story. You learn over the years how to pick up on somebody that might have assets versus somebody that doesn't. For an example, somebody that says they're living on their Social Security income. If they've already pulled Social Security at an early age, they needed the money. Perhaps that's not somebody that has a lot of savings, or they may or may not have worked in their career for a long period of time. So you pick up on those little nuances when you're having a conversation with somebody. But when it comes down to asking them for the money, we use key phrases, not how much money do you have saved or how much money do you have or how much, do you have invested? And we use this one key phrase that worked on every single phone call. And it's, tell me what you've done so far to prepare. Tell me what you've done so far to prepare for retirement. It's such an open-ended question, but it gets right down to tell me what you've done in terms of your savings and your investments. And it'll just get them talking because it's an open-ended question. So what have you done so far to prepare? Such an easy question, such an easy ask. And then obviously if they don't go straight into what they've saved or invested, you can pull that out with some tact too. But we just asked everybody, had a conversation and asked everybody, what have you done so far to prepare?
So this will be the first part in what will be a 3-part series. As I mentioned, the How Do You Work Less and Produce More series. And this first part, we're going to focus on before they come in for their first appointment and keeping them so that they come in. These are leads that are what I've dubbed agnostic. These tips aren't necessarily specific for if they're a radio or a TV or a seminar. These kind of work for anybody that's on the hook. And hooks will be something else that we get to in a moment, but put a pin in that. You said a couple things that jumped out to me about open-ended questions. Can you tell me why open-ended questions were so valuable when you're trying to elicit more information?
Absolutely. So the best way to conduct a phone call is to get the other person on the other line doing majority of the talking, right? They need some prompting. They need some, motivational interviewing when it comes to wanting to get the right information out of them. So we want to ask the right things to them, but we want them doing majority of the talking. Everybody likes to talk about their life story and what they've done, especially if they've saved their whole life. They're proud of that. They turned in their keys. They're walking away from a lifetime career that they had, and they still want to feel important. So it's fun for them to chat about that, and everything they did leading up to that, and how they've saved. It's like them puffing their chests out, and they like to share that information. Not just how much have you saved, let's put a dollar value on this caller. It's what did you do to earn this money? How hard did you work? And now I was in the Midwest, so there's a lot of, blue collar farmers. There's a lot of money out there, and they don't act that way. They're not just walking in driving Mercedes or coming in a 3-piece suit. It's people that are wearing flannel shirts that they're coming in off a cornfield, but yet they've saved millions of dollars, and they've worked really, really hard to get where they are. So they love to share that, and very humbly, and it's just so interesting. I love getting to know people and their life stories and knowing that the advisor that they're walking into is going to help do what's best for them for their futures.
That's funny you mentioned that you don't necessarily know the value of like how much somebody has saved up based on what they're wearing or what they walk into the office. I used to live in Austin, and you would go out to a coffee shop and you'd be sitting next to a millionaire and you'd have no idea because they're wearing sandals and a t-shirt and just a different mindset, different way of how they accrued their wealth. One thing that I really want to dig a little bit deeper on is the equation of the question. And something that you said in our pre-call was questions need prefaces, meaning blank, comma, question.
Yes.
And I want you to shine a little bit more light on that and maybe give me a couple of examples of what's the best way to deploy that equation.
Yeah. So we work on like a give-get technique where it's like as simple as this. Hey, my name is Beth. What's yours? I'm going to give you some information and then I'm going to get some information. We're training them up to answer us. So we start off with the real simple questions, how'd you hear about us? Typically, we know if they're calling in during the radio show, they're listening to the radio show. But asking those questions like, oh gosh, was this the first time you ever heard us on radio? Oh no, I've been listening to you guys for years, or yes, absolutely. This was the very first time I caught your show. Well, what made you decide to call today? And so we're starting off the conversation by just asking some of those easy questions. But anytime we want to get into more of the meat and potatoes and the harder questions, some people get offended by asking, are you married, right? So in order to ask that appropriately, it's, okay, so in terms of retirement planning, are you planning for just yourself or are you married?
Ooh.
Right? We're asking that same question, but instead of them getting offended, like, why do you need to know if I'm married? Especially for some people that maybe are divorced, or don't want to share too much of their business. The reason I'm asking you is because I need to know, is it just a meeting with you, or are you bringing in a spouse, or are you planning to take care of your 7 grandchildren that still live at your house, or are we planning just for your lifestyle? And so we ask some of those questions, but very tactfully, and use that give-get.
Tact was the magic word. I was going to say that same thing, and I wanted to know how you sort of perfected that. Did that have to come natural to you, or did that take some bad phone calls?
Well, again, I've spent my whole career doing a lot of this in terms of sales, lead calls, and it is a different arena, but it all transpires to be the same thing. So, when you're getting to know somebody and making them feel comfortable and welcomed, and then obviously trying to motivate them a little bit to give you those answers, That part of the phone call I was pretty well trained on. Now, training somebody else that's never been in the industry or in that role, that took some time. So
Yeah.
I coached up a lot of people that ran through this office and people that have worked across the country now that I've been with Impact. And it does take them some time to get used to these kinds of verbiage, the kinds of verbiage that we use on the phone, using the give get, using the motivational interviewing techniques. Keeping them motivated to show up for the appointment or to do the homework assignments that we'll talk to you about. You asked about pre-qualifying.
Yeah.
So we'll get back to that. But it's easy to train somebody to do those things. But you're right. It takes those people a little bit of extra time to really perfect that craft.
This is I don't want to ask the dumb question, although I'm not opposed to it, but the idea of asking the easy questions first, I guess that kind of makes sense. Like, hey, you want to kind of ease into this interaction in this, not necessarily transaction, but this interaction with someone that you really don't know. That said, what are those easy questions? Not why do it, but what are those easy questions?
Yeah, the easy questions are, what made you decide to call today? How did you hear about our office? Do you listen to the radio frequently, or have you seen us on television more than once? Or do you know any of our clients? Or when do you plan to retire? What did you do for work? Those are the easy questions. The harder questions are going to be more of the money questions, right? Yeah. When you get into talking about their assets, you're hitting a nerve, whether it's a positive or a negative nerve. Somebody either doesn't have enough or somebody has a lot of money, but they still feel like it's not enough. So you just never know the other end of the phone what you're going to get. But those easy questions are just the simple ones. The ones you would tell anybody off the street, ones you would tell the doctor in the doctor's office, or that you would tell your neighbor, just conversational pieces.
So you've given me already one phrase that works. What have you done so far to plan for your retirement? I love that. What else do you have in that sector where it really gets the ball rolling?
Yeah. So tell me what you've done so far to prepare, super open-ended. You can, funnel that in to make it a little more precise. Like you said, tell me what you've done so far to prepare for retirement. Some of the other ways to phrase things, instead of saying, how much money have you saved? We just say, okay, so suppose you just totaled everything up together. What do you suppose a total is for everything that you've saved up so far? Just peppering in those things like that you've saved up so far creates not an illusion, but for somebody that's maybe still saving, that's not where their final number is going to end. And so, yes, they've only saved, let's say, $500,000 at this point, but they're going to work 5 more years. So obviously they're going to keep saving money. But when you say, so suppose you just totaled it all together, that's like saying they haven't already done that. We know that caller on the other line knows exactly how much money they have.
So it's a little insulting almost.
Yeah. And it's like for the people that are like, oh gosh, I have no idea. Those are the people that are like, oh, probably don't have enough money to meet with you, because most people know exactly how much money they have in savings. They've checked it. If they're going to call a financial practice, they're going to have already looked at their financial accounts before they make that phone call.
You would think.
You would think. So when you say, suppose you totaled everything up, obviously we're trying to say, we know you haven't ever done that before, right? But we know they have, if that makes sense. So suppose you just totaled everything up instead of saying, and how much have you saved? It's just that little tweak of that verbiage that gets somebody to answer your questions a little bit easier, instead of just saying, and how much money have you saved?
And these motivated questions. You're not just shooting the breeze and just asking any kind of old question. You're asking questions that are very strategic.
Absolutely. Every call, if you're in control of it, and that's the other thing, we could go off a whole other gamut of that, but you want to keep control of the call by empowering that person to feel like they're the ones in control. So if they're the ones doing most of the talking, but we're the ones asking the right pointed questions in a way with tact, this person feels like they're telling us everything instead of us pulling it out of them. It's not a firing line of questions, right? It's more of a conversation. And you can be confident in that because every single lead call will technically flow around the same way, right? If you're asking the same questions in the same order.
Yeah.
And now each conversation might go off on different tangents, right? Some people are going to be very forthcoming about their life story. Some are going to hold those cards a little bit closer to their chest. But if they are a little bit cold on the call, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to get right into the money question. I need to warm them up a bit, right? Yeah. Ask them a couple more of the easy questions before I get into more of those hard-pointed questions. And it's so interesting when you hear a conversation that flows the right way. You don't feel awkward. It doesn't feel cold or awkward. But then when you hear some of these lead calls where it doesn't flow the right way and it's
Yeah.
a firing line of questions. I'll just give a quick example using a call center versus using a staff member to answer calls.
Okay. I can see that.
When you hear those call center calls, it's like, ooh, cringe. It's like, oh gosh, they shouldn't have asked that there, or they shouldn't have asked it in that way, or you can tell this person isn't receptive. Versus when you listen to a good lead call, right? It's like, oh, that sounds so easy. They make it sound so easy. Every call should be easy because it's flowing the exact same way every single time.
One of my notes from our pre-call was I wrote down the firing line. And now I know why. Just that direct line of question where someone feels like they're being interrogated.
Yeah.
Is that why those prefaces are so important to tack on before you ask that question?
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard you do it several times. I think it comes natural to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just fun because it's like, for me, doing this so much, I worked in a really busy office. We had a ton of lead calls coming in every single week, so you got to talk to a lot of different people. Some are going to be great, spilling their guts, and some it's like, I need to convince this person to like me enough to, one, tell me all the things I need to know, and for two, come in for their appointment, and for three, send me all their statements in advance to even step in foot into the office, right? And so for me, it became that challenge of, I'm going to win this person over. Right? So every single phone call, it wasn't like apprehension on, oh gosh, they're giving me objections, or oh gosh, they don't want to tell me their life story. It was, how can I win this person over on the other line so they like me by the time they come for their appointment? And it was fun for me. It's like, I'll get this one. Oh, I'll turn that guy around, or I'll get the wife to come with him, whatever the challenge became, it became a fun little game where it's like, I'm going to win them over. Because I knew at the end of it, what we were doing was right for people. And it was fun helping them and seeing those walls come down when it's like, oh, these people actually care about me in my life. They're not just after my money.
In our third episode, we'll dig in a little bit more on what people can do to practice and prepare for it. But what I kind of want to parse through a little bit more is pushing back on statements.
Yeah.
And not necessarily being too aggressive.
Sure.
I mean, where do you kind of draw that line where you throttle that back and say, okay, I need to take a step back and I may lose this person.
Yeah. Well, we never lost anybody, which is great.
Oh, okay, good.
Humble brag there. It's like I had the best conversion rate in the country, right? And it was because once you get used to being told no over and over, you find the ways around that no to convince them to turn it into a yes. And so it became kind of a given where it's like, well, this person's going to object. I already know that's coming, but I'm already equipped and prepared for that, right? I've already got the answer to their objection in my arsenal, and I'm going to say that. And I knew last time it worked with my last caller, so it's likely to work again with this caller. But when it came to, I don't feel comfortable doing that, it's like, oh gosh, I completely understand. We just had somebody the other day say the exact same thing as you. So we're normalizing that, right? We're not saying, well, you're weird for not feeling comfortable, right? That's totally normal. Gosh, you don't know us. You've just heard us on the radio. But I tell you what, we've been doing this for 30 years. And this is actually in your benefit. Here's why. Us having your statements in advance, we're going to be able to run a quantitative analysis for you. And we're going to be able to have some actual things ready and prepared for you before you even step foot in the office. And so we always turn it around to what's in the benefit for them. It's not, we need to see your statements to make sure you own the things you say you own. It's, hey, we want to be best prepared for you so we can have a really pointed discussion when you come in. We don't want to waste your time. We want to know how we can help you. Right? So it's always putting the onus back on them where it's like, well, yeah, you could come in without sending them in. But then if you wanted that portfolio analysis, we're still going to need those statements. So it's just turning it around to show them what's their benefit for it. And then we would come up with solutions such as, well, if it was, I don't feel comfortable sending that over the internet or faxing that to you, it'd be like, well, why don't you come in, a week before your appointment, just bring those copies. I'll make a copy in the office, give you a cup of coffee, shake your hand, get to know you a little bit better, and I'll give you back your original documents. That way, you know where we're located, mm-hmm. right? We've already, met face to face, and you feel more comfortable doing it in person versus I've never seen you. We're just talking on the phone, and now you're asking for all my personal information. So there was always some solution. It just depended on what worked best for that person.
I guess that's sort of the elephant in the room when you're having these what feel like very normal conversations is that to the other person on the other line, they haven't met you, they don't know you, and you're talking about some very important stuff with them.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, and you feel like a call isn't really going your way, talk to me a little bit about what a waitlist. the value of having a wait list and
Yeah.
being able to sort of play that card when
Sure.
you're on the phone with somebody?
Well, for those ones that are a little bit more difficult, I always got to blame it on the advisor instead of me, where it's like, gosh, I'm just the messenger. I'm just the middleman.
Oh.
You know, it was like, well, gosh, I'd really love to set up your appointment, but this is just Daryl's process. And if we don't have these statements in advance, he actually won't conduct a meeting. And it sounds like you have a lot of really important questions. Gosh, you're only 6 months away from retiring. You're in the red zone. So it sounds like we could really do something for you, and it'd be wise for you to come in. However, if I don't have your statements, I can't put you on his calendar. It's like going to the doctor and saying, I don't have my insurance card, but I have insurance, but I don't remember the name of the insurance, and I don't know how long I've owned it, but I'll get it to you after you meet with me. No doctor's going to do that, right?
Yeah.
So same thing. It's like we ran our office that way, where it was just like, these are the rules. The rules are the rules. I didn't make the rules, but I have to enforce them, you know? And so people that'd be like, let me think about it. Hey, absolutely. I tell you what, I'd love to, with your permission, put together an email with just some articles that Daryl's written, maybe some worksheets that might be helpful to your current planning process. And I'll throw in a couple of dates that we have. We're booking out quite a little ways right now. So, I mean, if you wanted, I could put you on for next month while you think about it. Right? And I'll pencil that in. You think about if you want to get us your statements. If you decide you don't, we'll move the appointment off. Otherwise, if you decide you do, you'll have a space, because right now we're booking out, we have a wait list for people to come in. And I'll send you all this information, give you our website, take your time, look over who we are. We've been in the industry a long time. We've been doing this day in, day out. But if you decide, you want to keep that appointment, you'll have a space. So I'm basically already telling them, right? Go look into who we are. Go check our FINRA. Go see what we do. We'd sure love to help you. It sounds like you have a lot of questions. We're booking out quite a little ways. So let's pencil that in. And then you go decide if you want to send them in.
What's the psychology of the wait list?
Well, it's, you want to give it to them, but you also want to take it away. Meaning, you don't want to send me your stuff? That's fine. I'll move on to my next caller, right? Because they do want to send their stuff in. They do want to get this thing going. You called us for a reason. Obviously, we will run back to like hot buttons, but what's the reason you decided to call? There's a lot of different reasons. Oh, the market's correcting. Oh, I hate my advisor. Oh, I'm retiring in a couple of weeks. Or, whatever the reason is, we want to tie that back into motivating them to do the things they don't want to do. So it sounds like you mentioned you really want a second opinion because you don't really trust your current setup. We'd love to run that analysis for you. We just wouldn't be able to do that without your account statements. So, it's like reminding them of why they called, why they need us, how we can help. Here's why we need your statements. We're not just taking them because we want to know your information, right? It's like there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
So it goes back to that preface. What's the reason we need it? How can you get it to us? There's a number of different ways you can, but you can't come in unless you do.
There's a common theme that will be throughout all three of these episodes, and we'll dive a little bit more into it in 2 and 3. And that's all while you're on the phone with them, you are taking very detailed notes.
Absolutely.
And you're not just taking notes for yourself, you're taking notes for the next person that could potentially be sitting in your seat that can pick up the ball and maintain, is exactly where you left off with this person, where those hot buttons are, what homework they have. These are all things that we're going to talk about in episodes 2 and 3. I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've covered a lot in terms of before they've ever stepped foot in the office and how you can kind of play the game a little bit to get them to say yes and stay on the line and stay motivated to come in for that appointment.
Yeah.
So this has been what I hope, really enlightening. We will go into the next episode will be they've come in for that first appointment. How do we get them coming in for that second appointment and keeping them on the line and keeping them on the hook, as we say. So thank you so much for joining me right now, Beth. We'll knock out 2 and 3, and those will be on there as well. And if you like what you see on this podcast, I got great news for you. Our Impact Partnership YouTube channel is loaded with all kinds of content that can help advisors grow their practice. We've got House Rules with Alex House, our Chief Marketing Officer, and Selling with Stories with Randy Cook, who kind of, again, lays out some of the blueprints for having difficult conversations with clients and prospects. So with that in mind, like and subscribe, and Beth will do this again.
Okay.